Hello, my name is Ashley Jocelyn, and I am here to give you a presentation on feminism. Who here has been a victim of catcalling, or knows anyone who's been catcalled before? Okay, yeah, see, that's pretty common. Catcalling, sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, isn't really perceived as any kind of like sexual harassment, but it is. It's unwanted social contact, I guess, out in public, where someone assumes that another person wants to hear that kind of thing. But it's inappropriate. It's something that women have to deal with. I mean, some men have to deal with it too, but mostly women have to deal with it. And feminism is one of the things combating that. For hundreds of years, women have been held back from gaining equality with men. Women have strived to be on an equal field with men, but have been held back from opportunities or that have been withheld or taken from them. Looking at recent history, women weren't even allowed the right to vote until 1920. Feminism exists as a result of unequal treatment of women. There have been many myths about feminism, and I would like to name a few to see if you guys have heard of them before. Only women can be feminists. Who's heard that? Okay. This is not true because many men also identify as feminists because they see the benefits, including equality and less pressure to fit the expectations of masculinity. Another would be that feminists hate men. Have any of you heard that? Yeah. As I mentioned before, feminists just want the same equal treatment to men. Nowhere in the description of feminism does it demand the hatred of men. According to Webster's dictionary, feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality to men. Today, rape or sexual assault on women is insanely common. Women are taught that they are in the wrong when men perform these actions, and men are taught that boys will be boys, basically condoning any improper action towards women. This is called rape culture. In the first quarter of 2013, states proposed 694 new laws regulating a woman's body in relation to how she can get pregnant and what she can do with her pregnancy. There are also no laws proposed to control what a man can do with his body. There is growing blame placed onto female victims in crimes committed to them by men, and a woman's voice is vastly ignored, and this can also be seen when we look at unequal pay in the workforce or certain positions that more men hold than women. I hope to show you that feminism is needed to combat rape culture, the impact of growing legislation to control what women can do with their bodies, and the tendency to pay women less in the workforce than men. Modern feminist history is split into 3 time frames or waves, each slightly different in the things that they are trying to receive as a result of previous progress. The first wave of feminism was in the 19th and early 20th centuries, focused on overturning legal inequalities, particularly women's suffrage. The second wave was between the 60s and 80s. This is where we're mostly familiar with the first feminist movements, and they tried to combat cultural inequalities, gender norms, and the role of women in society. This is a wave where you can see for the first direct feminist artists, like the work of Judy Chicago. The third wave was in the 90s to the 2000s and refers to various levels of feminist activity. The third wave is both a continuation of the second wave and responses to its failures. With the rise of the girl grunge punk rock music like L7, Hole, and Nirvana, all these bands made it a point to address feminism. Currently, I believe there is a fourth wave of feminism happening, and this wave is primarily fueled by social media. Today, there are so many female experiences shared online that make it ultimately impossible to avoid reading or watching a story of the unfair treatment of women. I know a lot of people who believe the battle for feminism has already been won, but through my own experiences and discovering experiences of others, I'm here to tell you we still have a long way to go. I remember reading a story last winter about a group of boys that called themselves the Roastbusters. This was a New Zealand group of kids in their late teens that would team up against girls, some as young as the age of 13, and get them drunk beyond the point of consent. and then bring them home and proceed to sexually team up on them. After teaming up, the boys would then post a video of the experience to the Roastbusters blog, and then encourage others to shame them, slut shame these girls. After several of the victims went to the cops, and they were told that they didn't have enough evidence to prove anything, even though there was video footage, it took a 13-year-old girl going to the cops for them to finally do anything about it. And the Roastbusters page was brought down, the blog was brought down, but the humiliation the girls felt was still there, and no one was prosecuted for anything. Cruel and disgusting events like this one happen every day, and they fit into society's acceptance of rape culture. Rape culture is a phrase used to describe a culture in which rape is normalized due to societal attitudes about gender, sex, and sexuality. One of the Roastbuster members, Moore Hales, was recorded on Facebook saying, "It's not rape. I had sex with one girl who was 13 and one was 16. She wanted it, and that's all that matters." That 13-year-old was the final victim to come forward and finally force police to get involved. It isn't hard to find cases like the Roastbusters online. It is, however, difficult to know exact number of female rape victims because it's highly discouraged and looked down upon for women to come forward about these things. Discovery.com, a website that dedicates its time to the news in third world countries, states that in conflict zones, rape of women and children is increasingly used as weapons of war. In other countries, marital rape is condoned, and some countries have laws that require a certain number of male witnesses to testify before a court will acknowledge that the rape has occurred. Even in developed countries, women are often blamed and questioned about their actions if they come forward as rape victims or physical abuse victims, while their attackers may not face the same questioning, and commonly don't. Even with the knowledge of these crimes happening, the existence of rape culture and the stigma against coming forward, the number of victims of rape only can be assumed, and it's not exactly definite. Feminism aims to abolish these problems and by raising awareness of them and reteaching humanity that women are human too, and just being born female doesn't mean our bodies are objects to do with whatever. This issue of who is allowed to control the female body goes as far as legislature. I've learned from UNPD.org or Human Development Reports that certain countries like Saudi Arabia, women cannot drive cars or ride bicycles on public roads, leaving them immobile, and they can't leave their own home without the company of a man. In other countries, women cannot own land, so if their spouse were to pass, they would be homeless. It is also widely known that in some countries, women aren't allowed to have an education, as was the case for Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani girl that was shot in the face by the Taliban because she was advocating for women's education. In America, the hot topic over the body of a woman lies in women's rights surrounding pregnancy. There is always discussion in the news whether or not a woman should be allowed to terminate her pregnancy. In the 80s, the concept of fetal rights emerged. This declared that the fetus has rights that surpasses the mother. The mother's body at this point is used as a container or an oven, and it should be forced, and if women should be forced to be a vessel for an unwanted pregnancy, then what consequences should there be for the baby's father? Based on the U.S. Census Bureau in 2013, 83% of single-parent families are matriarchal, or just single mothers. As a result of pregnancy, women can be forced to have cesarean sections against their wills if the doctors declare it best. They can also be refused jobs because employers would prefer no women workers instead of making working conditions safe for all workers. The workforce of women's pay has risen throughout decades, but it started at a very low level and based on discrimination. Today, females make up 40% of the management workforce in America, but are only paid 37% of what a man makes, and only 4% of CEOs in Forbes' top 1,000 companies are female. To me, this doesn't make much sense. Why pay a woman less when she does the same job as a man? Feminists just want to raise these issues, or want these issues to go away. They just want to raise awareness on these and just have everyone feel equal to one another. They are mostly issues that force control onto the female body and mind, and when she is perfectly capable of being in control of herself. Women should not be seen as targets, and we are now, by some men in our current, we should not be seen as the targets that we are by certain men in this current rape culture. We shouldn't be forced to abide by laws specific to our gender, and I question the response to these laws if the genders were reversed. We also shouldn't receive unequal pay or position advancement just as a result of our gender. Feminists have made strides in the last century, but we still have a ways to go, and honestly, it doesn't take one Joan of Arc to change things. It takes people like us in this room to stand up and affect change. Men and women alike should band together and take pride in being feminists and actively deconstruct the unequal treatment of women. Thank you.